Good morning. Today is Wednesday, June the 10th. This is the resumption of a recess meeting from last Thursday, June the 4th, of the Pitt County Board of Commissioners in their budget workshops for fiscal year 2021. And I'll turn it over to our chairman, Melvin McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr. Manager Scott. Thank you very much.
We have no sound in the auditorium.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, very good. I want to first of all say good morning to everybody. Just want as a reminder, this is a budget discussion meeting only. And no other issues will be entertained by the chair. Everyone would have his or her chance to speak. And I hope that this arrangement satisfies all of the commissioners. So with that said, Scott, we'll turn it back over to you.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had one item budget related for the new year that's not a follow-up. It's one I wanted to point out on terms of one of our revenue sources.
You do a roll call.
Okay, I'm sorry. The attorney and clerk is saying we need to do a roll call first. We'll move to roll call then.
Chairman
Otherwise.
McLaughlin,
Here.
Vice Chair Colson,
Here.
Commissioner Albright,
Here.
Commissioner Fitzpatrick is not present. Commissioner Floyd Huggins,
Here.
Commissioner Nunley.
Here.
Do we have Commissioner Perkins Williams? Okay, Commissioner Ward,
Here.
Commissioner White.
Here.
Okay, so we're missing Fitzpatrick and Perkins Williams, and it's noted that Fitzpatrick is unable to attend.
Okay, great. So as I was saying, there's one item in the budget in terms of revenue source, just wanted to highlight in terms of ABC revenues. ABC revenues are the distribution that the ABC board passes to the county in terms of their profits. Currently in the current year, we have $1.5 million of ABC revenues that are passed to the county. And Brian and I went out to the ABC board, I think back on May 23rd, and met with their new administrator and as well as their board chair and discussed the ABC board revenues. At that point in time, they agreed to an additional $100,000 in revenue distribution or profits being passed to the county. So I just want to point out that we have up to that ABC board revenue from 1.5 million to 1.6. And other than that, we do have before you this morning some follow-up from your June 4th workshop. We've prepared a PowerPoint with some options on it. This was emailed out to you late yesterday to kind of give you heads up so you can have it in your hands for this morning's meeting. Brian's going to run through these and then we can take any questions or comments or input.
I want to welcome everybody this morning. Good morning. And you have a copy of these options in front of you. They're also up on the screen. I believe I'm going to start with the first option, which was what was presented by the manager back on June 1st. As you can see, we've broken it out by general fund tax rate. At that point in time, that's the revenue neutral tax rate of 67.97 cents. General fund grand total was 182,259,640. So that was presented. So we were asked to look at some positions. We do recommend at least one of the 5 critical positions in DSS. We were asked to look at the other 4. We were asked to look at the physician extender in public health, and then we were asked to look at the 2 additional sheriff deputy positions for the courthouse as they expand district court. So those asks are all listed under option number 1. At that point in time, and it's still at this point in time, if we were to proceed, one step that we could take on option number 1 would be to take the 67.97 revenue neutral tax rate that we recommended on June 1st and increase that by 0.32 cent. That would bring us to 68.29 the tax rate, which is still lower than the existing tax rate of 72.1. But if you were to add that 0.32 on the tax rate, that would give you the additional $439,000 that would be needed for the 2 sheriff deputy positions, the physician extender, based on what the county's portion of that position would be. and then the 4 DSS positions. And that the DSS positions, obviously what we've also factored in is not only their salary and benefits, but we've factored in also the additional operating costs that would be associated. This is the case that you just can't bring in 4 new people. They would also need additional expenses to go with those positions. So that's option 1, being that you do increase the revenue neutral tax rate to 68.29 cents. Option number 2. And option number 2, what we've looked at is we were asked to look at some of our expenses to see if there are some areas that we could take a look at. And having taken a look at those expenses on option number 2, we're looking at only funding 1 additional sheriff's deputy. And then on the physician extender, instead of a full year, I'm talking to public health, just based on the realities of advertising position and getting somebody in-house, depending on if you have someone that's working, they got to put in a notice. They were looking at a time frame probably around after the first quarter. So instead of a full physician extender, you would only be looking at 3/4 of a year or 0.75.
And Brian, on the 1 sheriff's deputy position versus 2, my thinking or philosophy on that is, I'm not speaking for the sheriff, but knowing that in the courthouse, the courtroom deputies, for the most part, are retired deputies who come back part-time. The way that the ask was made was for the salary and benefits for 2 full-time employees with a vehicle, and those deputies in the courtroom don't have vehicles, and if they're part-time, they don't have benefits. So the thinking is that 1 full-time equivalent at $75,000 should be or would be enough, hopefully, to cover an additional courtroom at the courthouse. And in terms of the DSS positions, obviously in option 2 and option 3, there are no additional DSS positions. But I will go back to in our budget meeting with DSS, where we did the one-on-one budget meetings, and they presented their case for all their positions, which they always presented an excellent case. They did give us the top 5, and then out of the top 5, they said of those top 5, the 1 position they just had to have was the one that I funded. So I'm sure they would take more if they could get it. But at this point, I would go back to my original recommended budget and just give DSS 1 position. And if you want to add additional, I would do as Brian is alluding to here in option 2 and 3 about 1 additional sheriff's deputy and then the physician extender for public health.
And continuing on option 2, if you do take the 1 courtroom deputy and the 0.75 on the physician extender, that's $112,598 to fund those 2 asks. So what we looked at was could we find that $112,598 somewhere within the budget? If you drop down under that option 2 into the light blue column, you'll see that we have a contingency amount that we would reduce by $50,000, and then we would look at our building improvements. We talked to Tim Corley, our engineer. Some of our projects, obviously, we would love to do next year, but there's also we can defer those and push those out. So we are deferring $62,598. So if we decrease contingency and defer those facility improvements, you're looking at $112,598, and that would be the difference needed to fund the 1 deputy and 0.75 of the physician extender. And then our third option basically mirrors option 2, where you have the 1 sheriff's deputy and the 0.75 physician extender. You still have the revenue neutral tax rate. The only difference here, if you look in yellow, the health department currently is, after reviewing some of their services, there is an ask, and I'm going to show you on the next slide, which we already have a copy of, but there are an ask of certain services that could be provided at the health department. Obviously, if these services are provided, then the health department would be looking at attaching a user fee. Looking at these particular services and what they think they have the capacity to do based on the fees that I'm about to show you, they think they can generate next year an additional $22,000. That's $22,000 less that we have to transfer from the general fund to public health as part of our normal budget process. So that would free up $22,000 that could be used to pay for the courtroom deputy and the 0.75 physician extender if you look at the total budget. In that case, you would add the $22,000 as revenue, and then you would only need $90,598 left, and you would take $50,000 of that from contingency and $40,598 in facility improvement deferments.
And Brian, these fees that public health is proposing, these are services that you could technically go get in from a private practice. They're just proposing to offer these additionally within public health, but charge a fee for the service. And actually, public health had asked to do this as part of their budget request, and these were going to come forward as part of the overall budget. But we had asked them if they would just wait until the new year to after the budget was adopted. We just thought it might be too much for the board to absorb in terms of everything we were talking about. But now that we're looking at it and thinking that, these are optional type, these physical exams, sports exams, all these are physical exams, that these are revenue generating, that we would enter this into the scenario of number 3. And if you were to go with this could provide additional revenue to offset the cost of these 2 positions.
And so I've already clicked over to the next slide, which does break down, and you'll see that it's camp physicals, K-12 sports physicals, college sports physicals, DOT or firefighter physical exams, and pre-employment physical exams. These are the fees that public health is asking that you consider. If we go at option 3 and we do add these fees in, then this would become part of your budget package that we submitted back on June 1st. Obviously, I'm not a expert in these particular areas. So if you have any questions about the specific exams, you probably would have to refer to Dr. Silvernail. But just in terms of these are the fees that would be charged, and they think they have the capacity to do $22,000. End of the year, they could be a little bit more, could be a little bit less, but based on what they think they can do, this would be an avenue to help offset some of the additional costs with the 2 positions that we're looking at as part of options 2 and 3.
And Brian, on the DOT or firefighter physical exam, did they not point out that there are some state revenues or something that would help pay for that?
That could be a possibility. Anytime you do a public health, there's always a possibility of outside funding once you have initiated a service, and that outside funding is not available unless we provide that type of service. But I do recall
Something along
in
those lines.
at least one of these 5, I do believe there's some also additional help that they could be generated from outside of the county or just the user fee itself. So that being said, that's all we have. I can obviously jump back to any slide if you have any particular questions. I know you have printed copies in front of you, but we'll be glad to entertain any questions.
Mr. Chairman, we have Commissioner Nunley's hand up.
Just before we get to Commissioner Nunley, I just want to ask this question. This deferred building cost, Scott and Brian, in terms of not having any tax increase, 67.9% tax rate. What is your recommendation? As you can see, I think in terms of trying to get some of these positions that was mentioned, to do that without having a tax increase would certainly be somewhat to entertain, I think. Could you comment on that?
Sure. In terms of my recommendation as county manager, I go back to the recommended budget from June 1st, the first one in the left column. But if you wanted to add a couple positions, I could support either option 2 or option 3 if the board felt that strongly about adding some additional positions.
Without a tax increase?
Correct. With a rate adjustment from 72.10 down to 67.97. Obviously, we're in a reappraisal reval year. So depending upon what the value of your property appraised, that will then depend whether you're paying more taxes, the same taxes, or less taxes.
Okay, very good. Commissioner Nunley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This quick question, and it has to do with our COVID response money that for reimbursement of the CARES Act. And I wondered if there was something that would keep public health from not diverting from current programs, but potentially designating in-house a position so that those funds could reimburse a position in-house to allow that extended position to be funded within the current budget, so that we weren't taking, I'm sure that all avenues have been explored, but I didn't know if that had been explored, and if there was a restriction on that, what that would be, Brian.
So technically under the CARES Act, all public health employees are considered dedicated to COVID response. Right now, based on the plan that you all have submitted, you asked us to submit to the state, right now, most of our funding is tied up in testing. As we've alluded to, we can always revise the plan. Yesterday, we had a call with the folks in Raleigh, and specifically, they've made it as simple as taking the same plan and just changing the numbers. So it's a very simple process to make any changes to the plan. They just prefer that the change be approved so they can set up their systems towards the end of December to be able to audit that particular plan. In regards to your question, yes, if you want to look at the plan to look at offsetting public health costs due to COVID-19 and the CARES Act, that's always a possibility.
So presumably that physician extender position presumably could be funded in part with those CARES Act funds without modifying that initial plan.
Now, these costs are from March 1st through December 30th. So technically,
Right.
CARES Act would not
Not the full year.
technically fund the last half of the fiscal year.
Correct.
But enough funds could be pulled down between all public health from March 1st through December 30th to more than pay for that. But I would almost recommend keeping that pot of money separate and apart, the $3.1 million. Keep it for the testing, keep it for contingency and all those other line items. And as we move forward through the year, if you find that you're not using quite so much for testing, that we can always adjust that that plan we've submitted to the state. And maybe you don't have to decrease contingency by 50,000 if we want to reimburse some of public health personnel costs as part of the overall plan of using those dollars.
Yeah, and I would chime in. So there's the budget that we're setting up now, and the reason why we haven't pushed to staff the use of the CARES Act money for public health staff and public safety staff is because it does end on December 30th. So you would be putting a revenue in place, and then next year you wouldn't have that revenue in place to pay for that same position or positions. I think. And again, piggybacking on what the manager just said, there's always the opportunity as we get into the fiscal year to see how money is looking and we can move money around. But from a plan standpoint, it's not a strong push. I would recommend to use the CARES Act money initially on the beginning as part of salary reimbursement or to cover your salary costs.
We might find with testing that we need to use even more money of the 3.1 that we've already so designated or allocated. We may find that we only have to use half of it, and then we can use it for other purposes. But I think it's just too premature to know exactly how those monies will be actually spent, even though we have a plan of how we're going to spend them.
All right, sounds good. That answers the questions. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, you have Commissioner Albright, White, and Ward.
Okay, Commissioner Albright.
Thank you. Good morning. And appreciate all the work there on giving us these options. I wish that I may be the only one here, but I don't really think that what we're talking about with option one is much money. It's not really a tax increase. We're still looking at a reduction. We look around us and the city is literally raising their taxes, and we don't have an option that's raising taxes. We have one that is taking the revenue neutral and is slightly adjusting that. I wish that we could continue to look at option one, perhaps with only one of the sheriff's deputies. I believe that those social services positions are vital. We cannot escape in the world today the chant of Black Lives Matter. The extender is vital to us for our Black mothers and their infants. I think those 4 social services positions are vital to us, and that the value we get from them is not something that we can see right away. But we have a department that asked for 21 positions. I think we agreed to 2 and now 3. And so I wish that we could continue to try to fund those social services positions. It doesn't look to me like that's going to work. But we've had all this discussion about why are African Americans dying at a higher rate. We look at that. White privilege is being born white in this county. It's 4 out of 1,000 white babies dying and 17 out of 1,000 African American. I mean, that's, you know, that beautiful letter in the paper the other day about our soldier being the most obvious symbol of white privilege. And I wouldn't disagree with that. It's a very well-written letter. But to me, the most stunning example of white privilege is when you look at those birth rates, the infant mortality rates among whites and African Americans. And I believe that our frontline people in combating that are public health and social services. But yeah, I'll say that again next week. But yeah, as I say, I think that we're pinching pennies here at the cost of lives. But yeah, that's enough for me. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Albright. Commissioner White.
Yes, once again, just because the tax rate is lower does not mean that people will be paying less taxes. That's part of the revenue neutral. Some people will even be paying more taxes based on the property reval. So even though the tax rate is lower, doesn't necessarily guarantee lower taxes. And as far as the options 2 and 3, where we get revenues from other sources, such as putting off the building updates or and then with the contingency and the increase in public fees, if the economy is not doing better this time next year, the personnel is a recurring cost. So Brian or Scott, wouldn't we have to, if we don't have another source of revenue or the economy doesn't pick up in between now and next year, we would have to increase taxes to keep any personnel positions, correct?
We'd either have to find another revenue sources, i.e. a tax increase. We'd either have to look at cutting costs within departments, possibly, I mean, worst case scenario, reduction in force, i.e. layoffs if things got just drastic. The deep freezing of positions as it become vacant, and that would obviously be in worst case scenario. So there's multiple ways to attack that or address it.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Okay, very good. Commissioner Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In looking at the budget options, and thank you to the manager and his staff for bringing these forward, I think option 1 is not for us to consider. I mean, I know it's here, but if we were going to look at 2 and 3, I'm looking at the different contingencies that will have to be lowered. And I know I think I heard you all say you had talked to those departments that would lose that money, which is not all of their money for sure. But could you speak to some of the responses and what they said and what a difference you think that would make as far as these budgets are concerned of the different departments? And if you don't mind, if we were to vote on 2 or 3, which direction would you all see as the easiest to implement? I know I'm putting you on the spot, but I would appreciate it.
I'll start off, then Brian can add to it. In terms of the contingency is basically your fund. The contingency is an amount of money, and currently, as we originally budgeted, was it $150,000, and those are for things that come up during the year. There are unexpected, unplanned for. Department may have a need to replace a piece of equipment that they hadn't had planned in the budget for, and might come forward with a $10,000 or $15,000 request, and they would request contingency. So we've taken the contingency from $150,000 down to a flat $100,000. In terms of facility improvements, those are things that we plan on, whether it's roof replacement, carpet in buildings, just improvements. And there we just took I can't remember the original amount we had budgeted. Brian, do you recall?
Not off the top of my head. It's a unique number based on the needs.
300,000 is what staff is telling me we had originally budgeted. So we took 62,598 off of that 300,000. That means we'll just forego some carpet in areas or painting or whatnot, which we would feel is we could manage that. And then the third component would be those additional revenue from public health, which we did talk to them in detail about that, and I think they do support. Well, they plan on coming to you in July anyway to ask for these fees to be added into the budget. So this is just doing it now as they had originally planned and proposed.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman, Tom Colson, I got a question.
Ms. Coulson.
Scott, I agree with the public health fee increase. And during the health department, not yesterday, but last month, it was discussed, I believe. And all the discussion was centered around providing a service. And the money, I thought at the time, I don't remember anybody saying that any of the revenue would then be transferred to the county, but that it would stay within the health department. Have you had an additional conversation with Dr. Silvernail, or are you just saying that if we do this, regardless, the money will come into our budget?
Well, in effect, this $22,000 as projected would offset the physician extender at $35,774. So it doesn't even cover the cost of the physician extender as we've identified it here. It's really one and the same. I mean, the public health is part of the general fund. The general fund funds that portion of public health that is county funded. So they don't really have their own fund other than maybe a Medicaid set aside for Medicaid funds that come in. But for the most part, their fund is general fund.
I understand that, but I'm not saying a fund, it's their budget. You're saying fund where I think budget, correct?
I don't understand.
Their budget is what you're calling a fund, because their budget is based on whatever we actually end up giving them.
Correct.
So you're calling it a fund and I call it part of their budget. I would like to remind everybody that when we talk about revenue neutral, we had a big increase last year. So if the city comes up this year, well, remember last year, they didn't have the increase. So can't really compare the city increase and our increase, not increase this year. And revenue neutral is based on that increase from last year. I have trouble understanding a lot about the budget and how we fund positions. And I'll go through this again. There's 19 vacancies in the health department right now. We county commissioners have told them we want 100, and I think it's 30 positions filled, and we pay for them. We put that money out there for them to spend. And then we come back and we say, oh no, you can't fill that position because there's a hiring freeze or whatever. Yet we have already put that money forward to be spent. And that also applies to other departments. And I strongly object to us continuing looking at these, I'm going to say, fictitious funds that get rolled back into our at the end of the year, get rolled back in to our fund balance. Well, we knew when we put them in there last year that we wanted these positions. And yet it seems to me that we do everything we can to keep these departments, whether it's social services, whether it's the health department or whatever, from filling critical positions. If they're not critical, then let's cut them. Don't even put them in there. If 111 is what it's supposed to be, then it ought to be 111. Let's budget for 111. But then when the positions come available, they need to be filled immediately, which means that if they know 3 months from now somebody's getting ready to retire, they should already be interviewing people to fill that position. Yet we play these games year after year after year, and it just bothers me. And as far as the CARES money that was brought up a little while ago, I really think that we need to hold off and not make any decisions at this time and keep it separate from the budget. No further questions or comments.
Thank you. Do we have anybody?
Yes, sir. Commissioner Ward.
Okay, Commissioner Ward.
Yes, I don't want to put the two of you on the spot, but, you know, I came into this with my feeling, because we had seen these budget options earlier, with sticking to the manager's recommended budget, because these are very unusual times and we really do not know what's going to happen down the road. I do not think an increase in taxes is a way to go, not this year. Now, because I don't think we have a clue what's going to happen as far as this virus is concerned and what the county's going to have to do. I don't think we've seen the worst of it yet. But if we were to look at option 2 or 3, I'm still thinking about the people who are decreasing and the departments that are decreasing. If we were to go with either option 2 or option 3, Scott, can you or Ryan give us a little insight as to which one of those might be easier to handle, or that, you know, we wouldn't have to revisit in the middle of the year?
Option 3 would be preferred, because then you're still reducing contingency by 50,000, but the amount you're reducing the facility improvements goes from 62,598 to 40,598. So I would, if you're looking between option 2 and 3, for my recommendation, it would be option 3.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I can point out, in terms of DSS, with the additional positions they asked for, I think it was 21 this year. I'm not going to pretend to understand that I know the intricacies of their service demands and levels of all their different divisions, and the caseload increase that the DSS director, Jan Elliott, has presented to me very, very well over time and over the years. But I do want to point out that we look back to 2008, to the time of the last recession, in DSS, as well as other departments, did lose a number of positions due to the effects of the last recession. But I also want to point out, and I pointed this out to Jan Elliott this past week, that from 2008 to current, their head count in 2008 was 233 employees. They have now grown to about 291.5. I was telling her I know of no other department in county government that has actually added that many positions year over year. And not to say that they don't need them. I'm sure they can justify every single one they have, but it's not like we haven't added any positions to DSS, is my point. And again, Jan could get up here and argue the reason why she needs every single one of those 21 based upon our poverty rate of 25% in the county and the needs and demands that creates. But I did want to just point that out to the board. And Mr. Chairman, we had Commissioner Nunley has his hand up.
Okay, Commissioner Nunley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Scott, if I hear correctly, the report and under option 3, it's a public health fee increase, but it's actually an addition of services that are not currently being offered. So it's not taking fees that are currently being charged by public health and increasing those fees. This would be expanding the public health options, and there would be a fee schedule attached to those. Do I understand this correctly?
That is correct. And I'd say these, whether it's a camp physical fee, K-12 sports fee, college sports physical exam, the DOT firefighter exam, or pre-employment, these are not traditional fees that the health department provides in their array of services, but these are where we're looking to expand, where maybe they can create some revenue in terms of what maybe the private providers currently provide and charge for today.
And it's my understanding that a lot of these fees, they have been recently requested to perform, but they don't have the fee structure in place to actually perform the fees.
And being a member of the health board, if I could say, it was passed unanimously by the Board of Health to offer these services. There was a compelling case made for why it was necessary, not necessary, but it would add convenience to a lot of people. And also it would be cheaper than if they went to someplace else, a regular doctor.
Okay, thank you. I think that answers my question. So just mainly wanted to be clear that we're not, because when we hear fee increase, it sounds as if we're increasing something that's currently being offered. It's just an expansion of services that would purportedly be revenue generating. So I think that clears it up.
New fees, not fee increases.
Okay.
Mr.
Sounds
Chairman,
good.
you have Floyd Huggins' hand up.
Commissioner Huggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to all. I was gonna say something that Tom just said at the end of his statement, that in reference to the fees and these services offered, I'm sure it will be more convenient for people to go to the health department to get these services rather than trying to make an appointment with a private physician to get these services. So I see this as a plus for the health department to offer these services. So that was just what I was going to say.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else hand, Ms. Scott?
No, sir, not this time.
Well, it seems to me, if I just make the statement that option number 3, Scott, and it does not increase the tax rate, and it also provides some of the public health positions. It seems to me that that is a viable option. And you said, Scott, that you would recommend that over option number 2.
Correct.
Okay. Very good. Okay, any other comments?
Commissioner Floyd Huggins has her hand up now.
Commissioner Huggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If there are no other comments, and there seem to be nobody's hand is raised, I see Commissioner Ward. But I would like to offer a motion that we adopt option 3.
Or if I can chime in, I think what you want is to direct staff to prepare a budget to go to public hearing that would be based upon option 3 as your preferred choice.
Yes, that's what I want to say.
Very good. Commissioner Ward.
I would like to second the motion that she agreed to.
Okay, that we'll forward that to the public hearing. Scott?
Okay, Mr. Chairman, there's no other hands up, so I guess at this point in time, if
It's discussion, and then you need to vote.
Yeah, discussion, then vote.
Okay. Are we ready to vote?
I see no hands up for discussion, so Mr. Chairman, I would assume you would move to voting. You have a motion by Commissioner Floyd Huggins, seconded by Commissioner Ward, to take option 3 to the public hearing for public input on the fiscal year 2021.
Point of order. We have 2 commissioners not here. Do we really have to take and vote on this as a declared motion, or can we just give a what I want to say, a heads up
Indication or-
indication to the staff to just prepare a budget based
Either
on
way
it.
works.
Yeah, either way, my understanding, really at this point in time, we can prepare, it's more work on staff, but we can prepare actually as many options as you see viable up until the moment you actually vote. It just makes it easier to have one option that we put out to the public to compare to the manager's recommended option. But technically the manager's recommended option from my standpoint is the one that kind of starts the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And then during the public hearing obviously we can take public comment, and then you all still have the option to make changes up until the time you vote.
Okay, well then, having said that, if we proceed with the vote, I'm going to vote no. I'm voting no because I don't think we really need a motion. I think that we just need to just send staff a message and say, okay, go ahead and prepare a budget at that.
Okay, very good. There is a motion on the floor, and there is a second. Madam Clerk, proceed, please.
Mr. Chairman, you do have Commissioner Ward's hand up.
Commissioner Ward.
That's fine. I just wanted to make sure we saw that. I don't think we've ever not voted on sending the budget forward, so I really want to see that happen because we show our confidence in that as commissioners. And I know it can be adjusted and changed, but we're only sending it forward. But I do think that it's our responsibility to vote on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Chairman McLaughlin,
Yes, option 3.
Vice Chair Colson,
No.
Commissioner Albright,
Yes.
Commissioner Floyd Huggins,
Yes.
Commissioner Nunley,
Yes.
Yes, hello.
Commissioner Ward,
Yes.
Commissioner White.
Yeah, she's not on any longer. Let me see if she's communicating via text. No. Oh, she said had to go. She had something come up at work. Her statement is, I will not support any option that increases the tax rate.
If she's not present for the vote, under your remote procedures, her vote is not counted because she's left the meeting. And so you will just go with the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 votes that you have.
Doesn't that mean we as commissioners we have to declare her absentee as being unapproved?
Under the new legislation that addressed remote meetings, if someone were in a live meeting and walked out, their vote would count with the prevailing side under your rules. Under the remote meetings, if somebody leaves the meeting, their vote is not counted.
Really?
And so her vote will not be counted because she's not present for the vote in a remote meeting
All right.
setting
Well, it's
only.
going to pass anyway. Would you send me a copy of that?
Yes.
Thank you.
So the motion passes 5-1.
Very good. The motion passes 5-1. Thank you very much. Mr. Manager,
Yes, sir.
do you have any other further comments?
Yes, sir. I think we are prepared to move forward to your public hearing on Tuesday, June the 16th at 7 p.m. You then have a special call meeting scheduled for Thursday, June the 18th at 9 a.m. Then to formally consider adopting the fiscal year budget for 2021.
So at this point, we can declare this meeting adjourned until the public hearing. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. If no further action, the meeting stands adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Did that